Live.
Hey, hello everybody. Welcome to Writer's Block Causes and other things involved. Sorry, causes and cures. Hopefully, yeah. Thank you. There you go. Teamwork. So yes, so I'm just distracted by the YouTube at the same time, the delay. Hello, YouTube. How's it going? That's now muted. So yeah, welcome to the panel. A few things I'm tasked to remind you with, even though you've probably heard it 1,000 times by now, since we are the final panel, barring the awesome Virginia and Pam wrap-up show right after this, which you have no excuse to watch because there's nothing else on at the same time. I want to remind you about our free and 99-cent book sale, which is still going, and this is your last chance for the end of the convention, so please feel free to pop over there. Also, make sure that you are aware, if you aren't already, if this happens to be your first panel, to adhere to the code of conduct, which you can find on the website QuaranCon2022.com/code of conduct, all in one word. There's also the anthology and the merch show, so lots of goodies to check out if, for instance, you're stuck looking at a blank page and don't know what to write. Because this is, as I said there, the Writer's Block panel, I am your moderator, J.R.H. Lawless. Call me Jay. Also on my checklist, I'm supposed to read this awesome introduction. So, the dreaded phenomenon known as writer's block has many cures, and some mythical authors claim never to suffer from it. Let's examine this mysterious ailment. Is it caused by doubt, plot problems, external factors like stress or depression? And what are some tried and true methods to overcome its nefarious grasp on our psyche? I thought it had a nice epic tone to it, that description there, so hope I did justice. Yeah, so I'm J.R.H. Lawless. I am a lawyer / science fiction author / whatever else you want, coming to you from unceded Beothic and Mi'kmaq territory in Atlantic Canada. I have 2 novels out currently. The Rude Eye Rebellion is the most recent one, second book in the General Buzz series, starts with Always Greener, and a bunch of short stories. I'm the chair of the SIFWA International Committee, a new committee we've created, SIFWA. I do a fair amount of work with contracts on as well with SIFWA and mentoring. So hopefully a fair amount of various things that I can bring to bear, although it's not hopefully just to help wrangle and keep things on track with our awesome panelists, who will now introduce themselves if they dare. And I'll take the order of the screen, okay? So sorry about that, folks. So first off, SG.
Thank you, Jay. It's wonderful to be here. My name is SG Blaise. I'm a sci-fi fantasy author of the award-winning Lesslomania series. I have 2 books out and currently working on the 3rd one.
Awesome. GD, Gary.
Hello. I'm a fantasy author as well. I have several books out there. Google me, you'll find them.
Wait for Google. Intisar?
And my name is Intisar. I write young adult fantasy. My little tagline is I write mighty girls in diverse worlds. And I have a couple of series ongoing right now. And I'm coming to you from Cincinnati, which is the unceded land of the Delaware, Miami, and Shawnee tribes.
And last but most certainly not least, Andrea.
I'm Andrea Stewart. I'm the author of the Drowning Empire trilogy. The first 2 books are out. It's Bone Shard Daughter and the Bone Shard Emperor. The 3rd one's handed in, yay! And it's epic fantasy.
Awesome. So obviously we'll go through our questions, but hopefully you also have questions. So feel free to pop those into the chat in the YouTube, which I will be monitoring. And depending on how it goes, let's try and keep it fluid. We can either take those if they're relevant to what we're talking about as it's going, or we'll try and address all those at the end. But definitely feel free to keep it coming, as QuaranCon has already posted most excellently in the chat. So first off, what even is writer's block for you? Is it a thing? And if it is a thing, what sort of thing is it? So maybe same order for the first question again, and we'll shake things up later on. So SG.
It's a great question, Jay. For me, the writer's block is something that would stop you and you can't move forward. And as such, I haven't experienced it in the 9 years I've been working, because the way I started out on my writing journey. And that is, after learning to speak fluent in English, I jumped into writing my first book and learning the writing craft simultaneously, which forced me to step away from my work to attend writers' conferences, go to workshops, or go to the weekly read and critique meetings. So I learned to keep an open mind and stay positive about this. And so I started to consider writer's block as a challenge. Something I can overcome, something that there is a solution to. And as I learned more of the structures and started to understand the writing craft better, it became easier and easier to look at these challenges and took less time to take care of them.
Awesome. Gray, you want to go next?
Sure. Writer's block is a horrible supernatural threat that plagues us all. I actually stopped writing for almost a whole year because of writer's block at one point. So you almost didn't have the wonderful books I made after that because it was so bloody annoying sitting down and trying to get the actual words out. That said, I tend to think of it more as a symptom of other problems as opposed to a problem in itself.
That's an excellent point. Intisar, do you want to?
I wholeheartedly agree with JD. I think that writer's block is very real, and it is a symptom of usually other things that are going on, whether they're in your life or in the book. And there are, once you can kind of figure out what the true cause is for you, then you can figure out a way to approach it. But that takes a little bit of introspection usually, and sometimes it can be hard to do that.
For sure. Andrea, what do you?
Yeah, there's really not much more for me to add. I think it's just an inability to move forward one way or another. And I do agree that, yeah, it's generally a symptom of something else.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? I tend to say that writer's block is maybe like a bit of a romanticized term that we're putting on a whole bunch of different processes within writing. And, just like we have this imaginary author and this imaginary, what writing is supposed to be like one of those memes, what people think my job is. But, writer's block is a bit of a catch-all for a whole bunch of different things that, require introspection exactly to work out what it is and move past them. Cool. So speaking of which, on the more writing side of things, the craft side of things, do you think that writer's block can be a signal that there are issues with the work itself, and that's what you need to address, strictly with, inside the craft, inside the work, the manuscript itself? So shuffle two. Intisar, do you want to go first, or if anybody wants to jump in? Sorry, I shouldn't be.
Sure. I mean, I'm happy to start. I think that there's a few things that could be happening within your book that could cause writer's block to kind of hit you. I think for me, from what I've seen, I feel like one possibility is that you're kind of lost in your book. Something unexpected happened and you don't know how to handle it. And so it's really an issue of you don't know where to take the plot next, or you don't know how to handle what has happened in the plot. It's a good idea. You just don't know where to go from here if something unexpected happened. And that's really, really time for you to sit down and focus on how you create story, right? So if you're a plotter, then you need to sit down with your pen and your paper and plot. And if you're a pantser or you're intuitive, you really need to take time to step back and imagine out, however that process works for you, where the story might be going from here, right? If you're lost, you have to find your way, and a lot of times we sit down at the computer and we haven't done this back work because we don't value it. We're like, oh, I got to get words on the page, but actually you have to know where you're going to get words on the page. And so it sounds really like stupid and simplistic.
Well,
But like you
it's
got to
so
think
true, though.
before you sit down
Yes.
at the computer.
So true.
And I think it's also the fact you're getting more and more stressed out about the fact you're not getting the words on the page, which drives you to try and push harder and harder and harder, and that's very rarely the actual solution.
Yeah. Pushing, doing. It wasn't it Einstein who said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. So if you're stuck and you're doing the same thing today that you were doing yesterday when you were stuck yesterday, you can't expect to get much farther than you were. So try something different. And like I want to be really careful about being prescriptive here because we're all wired differently as writers. So
Of course.
if it has never worked for you to plot, this is not the time for you to try and like sit down and make a detailed outline. Don't question your ability to write.
Mhm.
Just help yourself figure out where the story is going the way that works for you.
It's funny you say that because that's exactly the opposite of the advice I was about to give. I was going to say if you're
Well, then
if you're-
also try what
That's
JD says. What would you say, JD?
no, if you're a pantser and you've just been relying on your intuition to carry you through, then when you run into a problem, you can't see what the problem is because it isn't laid out in front of you. If you're, I mean, you never hear about architect's block. You never hear about butcher's block. Well, apart from the butcher's block, it's a craft and it's a skill set. And if you don't know the basics of what you're doing, then I'm not sure how you can proceed through the actual job. So a lot of the time, I feel like writer's block might be cat. Writer's block may just be some gap in learning showing up.
It could be, but if you've been writing for a while and you have writer's block and it's this particular issue of not knowing where to go next. I mean, like for me, I don't sit down and write and plot, but what I do is I get in my bed and pull the covers over my head and I just sink into that world and imagine it. And I rarely value that time because I just feel like I'm daydreaming, but that's where my story actually builds. So when I hit writer's block in this kind of situation, it's literally like a flag to me that I need to get back in bed.
It's just too much like hard work. I'm going back to bed.
And that's how, I mean, that's the equivalent for me of outlining, right? But because my brain is imagining forward and it is playing with the characters and it's coming up with new possibilities. So I guess what I mean is not like, don't think about the story or don't plan ahead, but do it in the way that works for you.
That's very interesting. You said that. I'm the opposite of Pantser. I tried Pantser for my first draft, and boy, did I get lost in that draft. And then I tried the other way, the plotting, and started to develop how to plot a book. And that would take 3 to 4 months for me before I start writing. And I noticed that helped with a lot of issues. Of course, it also created other issues, right? Because now if you make a mistake with, say, the goal, that tracks throughout the whole story, you do have to go back to the beginning and unravel where it went wrong, how to change it. So it has its own set of problems, but it also becomes its own set of solutions because now you know how to identify and even where to look for these problems that could be inherent when you plot a story.
Absolutely. And of course, the really simple solution to that worry is just do it absolutely perfectly first draft,
Oh yeah, there you go. Easy. Swish. Andrea.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it can be a symptom of there being something wrong with the story. I think that's part of the problem with writer's block is trying to figure out exactly what is causing it. Like, is it because your story is broken? Or is it because of some other external factor? So yeah, I mean, I don't think we're talking solutions just yet, but I think there are a number of things you can do to kind of pinpoint that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. And maybe we can start with you then for that natural segue there in terms of tools and solutions, cures that you found helpful to fight against writer's block, I suppose, whether it's internal or maybe more external factors. What from your experience could you suggest there, Andrea?
Oh gosh. Okay. So there's a lot of things.
Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot there.
I mean, I think first, like, you kind of have to figure out, like, am I having trouble moving forward because I just don't know where this story is going? Is it because there's something that's broken in the story? Is it because of an external factor? Like, is it a mental health issue? Were you just burned out? Or did you just like not give yourself enough time to percolate this, like the characters in the world, so you don't really connect with them enough for the story to flow? I do think it's funny, like when you see the depiction of writers in movies and they're so often suffering from writer's block, and it's because like their muse is just not like working for them. And I'm like, this is a very like magical view of what writing is like, but I don't really think that it's like that. I think it is just like any other kind of job in a lot of ways. But yeah, I think that there's like a number of different things you can do. If your story is broken, you can do something like reverse outlining, like going back through and just kind of jotting down what's happening in each chapter. And that can kind of allow you to see like, oh, well, like, where did I break my story? Like, what about this is not like following an arc that feels right? Another thing you can do if you're just getting stuck on like, well, what happens next, is to open up a new document and start like free writing, just like, oh, like this is what I think should happen, or like if you write yourself into a corner, like, you know, where you do that thing where people say you should just be as mean to your characters as possible and put them in the most difficult situations ever, and then you're like, well, I did that, but what do I do now? And then you know, then there's always like talking to friends, and you know, obviously if it's something external, if you're burned out or if you haven't allowed yourself enough time to percolate your story or your characters, then you know, you need to take a break and go do something else. And I mean, writers get their inspiration from so many different things. Like, we're not always just stuck in a room like typing isolated on our computers. We shouldn't
most of the time.
You've got at least 3 other cats in the room though, right, GD?
1, 2, 3, 4. We've got the full set.
Oh goodness.
Nice.
I got like 1, 2. That's what you need to do to get past writer's block, right? Or sometimes they cause it. Like...
So beyond cats, any other thoughts or suggestions? Anybody? Just
yeah, it's definitely, as Andrea said, I want to piggyback on the taking a break. It is absolutely a tremendous help when we allow ourselves to take a step back. I'm not a firm believer that you have to write every day, because at some point we will force, you know, the inspiration, our creativity, and that could cause more harm than help. So I definitely started to build in a day or two every week where I don't write. I don't look at my work. I don't think about it. I just step away from it. In fact, when I'm finished with a draft, I go away for a whole month. I don't look at it. I let it just percolate, because we get so close to our own stories and our own characters that not only we start to bore ourselves, but we just stop seeing the problem because we're way too close to everything that we wrote. And so I'm a firm believer of allowing time off and not to force writing. I don't sit in front of the computer when I don't feel like writing, because that can create this loop of staring at the page, the blank page, waiting for that cursor to move. And it's not very productive. So I started to create that routine that when I write down, when I'm sitting down, I'm going to write. And if I'm not capable of writing within the first 10, 15 minutes, I walk away. And I have my favorite method of dealing with challenges is the back burner thinking. I put it on the back burner. I don't think about it actively. I just put it in the back burner, and within a day or two, I get a solution.
Do you switch between projects when you're putting
Exactly.
something on the back burner? Yeah.
Exactly.
It makes a big difference. Well, I'm not going to suggest anyone follows my particular path towards this, because my background is probably a little bit different from everyone else's here. I came into writing from being a ghostwriter. So I was paid by the word, which basically meant when I lost my day job and that was all I was doing, if I wasn't writing every single day, then my family didn't eat, which was actually exactly the kind of pressure that will make you sit down at the keyboard every single day and write. And it's amazing how quickly you know, when starvation's hanging out behind you, it's amazing how quickly you can change your opinion on whether you have writer's block or not. So no, not less pressure, more pressure, lots more pressure. Dangle from a rope, and if you haven't got 1,000 words done, someone cuts it.
That's impressive, JD. I'm very impressed.
It was not an impressive time. It was mostly just a lot of crying and drinking. It wasn't fun.
But words happened.
Well, we're still here, so they must have. Not sure how many of them I remember, but they must have happened.
Intisar, do you want to?
Just to kind of play off of what SG said with sitting down and the story's not coming and then moving on to something else. I will say that if you're bored with your story, that's a you problem.
Yeah.
And you need to work through
Say
it.
I was bored.
Yeah, I mean, but
you
what
could
that
get
means,
bored.
like, so you might be second guessing yourself for writing on the subject and not sure that this is the book you need to write. And in that case, I mean, yeah, take a few days and figure out, like, why did you start writing it? What's your purpose? Are you really the right person to write it? Like, maybe the answer is no, and that's fair, then you need to shelve it. But if your problem is that you're getting bored with this piece because there's all these silver shiny other new ideas calling to you, you need to tell them to be quiet, whatever way that is. Like for me, sometimes if I have a super silver shiny story that's just screaming my name, I will write a couple scenes and I will make some notes about it, and then I put it away. And it takes me a day or two, and then I'm able to actually make the voices shut up and go back to my main manuscript. So you figure out what works for you. But if you're really just bored with your book, then either skip the boring part because the readers are going to be bored too. Set something on fire, right? Like make something go wrong. Like maybe not too much, like Andrea said, but change it up, because if it's that boring to you, you need to get through the work, pretend your family's depending on you. But B, like maybe this is just a part of the book that isn't working, and you need to either change it or skip it and come back to it when you have a better sense of the full arc of the book. And then I'd say, I mean, I have a lot to say about kind of life reasons why we might have writer's block. And I don't know if we want to talk about that separately.
I
Jay,
think,
or...
I mean, now's the time, really. It's general at this point, yeah.
So I would love to also get everyone else's perspectives on these. And if we can kind of, please interrupt me and we can have a dynamic conversation. I'm up for that. But so I feel like for life causes, like for me, sometimes I have a really hard time writing when there's emotional intensity in my book. And because of where I am in my life and what's happening, I can't actually face what my characters are dealing with. And I don't necessarily connect the dots, but it is too emotionally raw for me to sit down and write sometimes. And there isn't, I think we forget, like we talk about writing as a career, but it's an intensely personal occupation, right? Like we're sometimes channeling really deep, hard things into our books, and we don't even always realize that. And so, like when I hit something that's just too emotionally raw, I have to find a way to talk about it before I can actually write it. So whether it's talking it out loud to a friend or sitting down with a notebook and writing about it, or like Andrea said, that kind of free writing where you're talking about what you're going to write, but you're not actually writing it. Those are the kinds of processes that help me to come back and actually write it. But a lot of times I have to decide whether I have the emotional resilience to write that scene right then. Like maybe the answer is like, no, because my life is in crisis. We're in the middle of a pandemic and I can't handle that. Or maybe the answer is I have a deadline in a week and I dang well have to finish writing this book, so I've had both, so just kind of working through. But a lot of times for me, those really emotionally raw scenes where, where there's betrayals or there's deaths or there's something serious happening and you're like, why can't I write it? I know what needs to happen. I just can't put it on the page. Like a lot of times that's something deep inside of you that's hurting and doesn't want to face it.
Yeah, they do say writing is healing, right? But for the healing to start, we have to face our pain
Yeah.
and deal with that. And we all go through different ways of dealing with that pain. And it takes time, it takes care, it takes to be kind to ourselves, to allow to go through it. And if we're not ready to experience it, then put it to the side and wait. But at the end, writing is going to help to heal. It just takes time.
That's a very, very good point. Yeah.
You see, that's usually when I leave a little note in the manuscript saying this is future GD's problem. Something very sad happens here. Deal with it later.
And then you curse your past self.
Daily.
But it can be a really good approach if you have a chunk of your book left to write and you just can't face that scene. If you know what's going to happen in it, just describe what happens in a few sentences and move on, and you can come back to it and maybe you'll be more able to handle it. Yeah,
absolutely. And even just outside of the heavy emotional scenes, it's a good way to get past writer's block. Just say, okay, something about this isn't clicking, let's skip on to the next bit, we can come back.
Yeah.
I do have to say I think there's kind of a couple different kinds of writer's block. Like there's like the kind where there is something like wrong with your story, or you need to take a break, or you're just like not emotionally in the right place to write something. And then there's the kind where it's just like an inability to concentrate and see it through. Mm-hmm. Which is like, I feel like
even that. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I feel like when I was first starting out, like writing, that was something that I encountered a lot, was just being unable to finish a book because I would reach a certain point, usually like, 30, 40K, right? Mm-hmm. You're like
clockwork.
Yeah, this is bad. And I have to start over to do something else. And I think different.
Yeah, I think that kind of perfectionism and unrealistic expectations of what a first draft should look like is a source of writer's block. Like that kind of like you hit 30 or 40,000 words into your book and you're like, this is not the masterpiece I thought I was writing. And it's like, it never is, guys. It never is.
It's like a false writer's block, right? It's like you're lying to yourself. You think that it's terrible, but it's really not like as bad or unfixable as you think it is.
Yeah.
It's just you headbutting your ego at that point, isn't it? Saying, no, I'm the best. Of course this should be better than this.
But I think,
I heard this really interesting description. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just meant to say that it's also, what are we solving for in the writer's block, right? Are we solving for to have only one draft? Are we solving to be done in 2 years, right? Because those can create their own set of problems when we don't allow ourselves to organically grow as a writer. I usually don't have a word count set up because there are days when I only do 1 page. There are days when I do 6 scenes, and that could be 30 pages, right? We need to be able to allow ourselves to be flexible and to have fun when we can have fun, and just to not put too much pressure and not to be too perfectionist. Don't self-edit as we write, right? It's the biggest temptation to, you wrote a page and then you go back to the top and edit every single line. It's not going to help as much as we think it will. We just have to let it get on the page and then we can go back.
But it's so funny because there are some writers that do self-edit as they go, and like that works for them. I don't understand it personally, where they like go and like they make a chapter like perfect and then they move on to the next one, and like that's their process. For me personally, I can't do that because I have like larger problems. So if I did that, I would have to just break everything again, and it doesn't really make sense. But yeah, I think that part of that too is just figuring out what works for you and what doesn't. Like one of the things that works for me when I think that I am having difficulty writing something, a lot of times it's just a lack of concentration, or being distracted by other things. So I turn off my internet for 2 hours. And it's funny because like, I'll sit down and be like, oh God, like I just turned off my internet. I'm like gonna just sit here for 2 hours. But inevitably, like I'll end up writing something. So I think it's like, yeah, you kind of do have to figure out like what works for you and what your problem in the moment is.
Mhm.
Because maybe you do turn off the internet and you write something for 2 hours, but then it turns out like you just scrap all of it too. Like, who knows, right? It's unfortunately not a science.
No.
Writing, you end up scrapping is part of the process anyway. Sorry,
Yeah.
SJ.
Oh, no. That's the same thing I wanted to say. I've known author friends who have hard time cutting everything. So we came up with a solution for that situation is to have an extra document where they copy paste what they cut out, even if it's half a sentence, because sometimes we just have to have that knowledge that it's saved. Whatever we wrote, it's
Mhm.
saved. We're not gonna lose it. It's not gonna go to the nothing and disappear. So that can be a solution too.
Yeah, I always lie to myself. I'm like, oh, well, I might use some of this later, and I like never use it. So
It's there, but it's there.
Very good lie, though.
Yep.
It does work.
It does. Radio. So please keep those questions or pop questions, anything you have as we go, because we'll be coming to questions probably after this one here. Give you having a look at the time there. So we're just talking about also taking care of yourself and so on. Do we think and that writer's block has maybe taken new forms in this pandemic? And I'm not going to say post-pandemic because it most certainly is not world. And whoever wants to jump in, go for it. I've lost track.
I mean, it made absolutely no difference to me because I was already a miserable hermit. So I wasn't even aware that there was a pandemic for quite some time. I was still sitting here banging my head against the keyboard. No change. Although, just as a slight aside, I would really like to swap jobs with SG. That your writing schedule sounds delightful. I would love to do that. That sounds so pleasant.
Thank you, JD. Appreciate your kind word. I noticed a little bit of higher level of distraction, when the pandemic hit, but I also have to differentiate between a writing block before publishing and writing block after publishing, because what I noticed that the marketing and business side of publishing really just destroys creativity. It's a different brain that we're using when we're doing business versus when we're trying to be creative. So for me, that was the lesson to learn to, when I'm doing business, focus on the business or the marketing or social media. But when I'm writing, none of those can enter into the picture because they are a big distraction and not very creative or inspiring. So that was my lesson to learn, which coincided with the pandemic.
It's funny you say that because I know there are a lot of authors out there who try to write to the market. They study the business side of it and try and work out what they're going to be producing next based on that. And I have no idea how anyone can find any creativity in doing that.
Especially because it takes so long to publish and the market changes faster than that.
That's it.
Yeah.
Glacial publishing.
Yeah, I mean, if you're self-publishing, I think that makes a little bit more sense. Probably works a little bit better. But yeah, with the pandemic, I don't know. Like, I've mostly heard about how it has changed things for people. For instance, I know that some people kind of had a really rough time of things in the sense that their books were coming out early in the pandemic, and that was really hard on people, and I think definitely could contribute to writer's block issues, because you spent like so much time and effort on your book and then suddenly it comes out and it's not doing well. Like that can, and it's not your fault, it's just because of the state of the world. I mean, that can really be a blow.
It breaks your heart. It really does.
Yeah, my first book actually came out the same week that we went into lockdown in March 24th, 2020.
I'm so sorry.
Everyone was buying toilet
same
paper,
here.
and I was like, I have a book.
Yep, March 2020, same thing.
It's hard because it's like, how do you compete with that, right? I mean, yeah, I think there was that meme you've seen, like, what is it, like with Will Smith, or not Will Smith, Will Ferrell. Sorry, where like everything's burning down behind him and he's like, I have a book. Like authors everywhere around that time, right? Yeah. I mean, for me, I sold my book right before the pandemic started. and then also got pregnant, and we had like a baby.
Oh my God.
And then I'm like,
Congratulations.
I'm having my second pandemic baby soon.
Oh,
But yeah, so I don't really know, like, I don't know what it's like to try to do this professionally, not in a pandemic. So yeah, I think it definitely makes things harder, I would assume, because I know, like, in the beginning, when I would normally have like more like family help with like the kid and everything, didn't really have that. So it's like, what are you supposed to do, right? It's hard to keep on a deadline when you have like a pandemic going on, and then like maybe you just don't have the like same like childcare or anything that you expected, or you don't get to see like your friends and family as much. I mean, that can have like a huge effect on your mental health, or even just like your time allotment. So I've heard from friends who had their kids in like virtual school during that time. It's like, how can you possibly write and also manage your children's schooling? It's like, it's just, yeah. So I think that's
Yeah, we couldn't. The kids just had to fail. It was fine.
yeah, I definitely think the pandemic changed things for a lot of people. We can't, I mean, Brandon Sanderson is wonderful. We can't all be Brandon Sanderson, and that is not always going to be the coping method for everybody.
That fucking guy.
I mean, like, I'm like, well, go for you. That's amazing. But I think it's not everybody has the same coping mechanisms, and that's fine. And I think that's another thing that you have to keep in mind with writer's block is like, don't beat yourself up over it. If you like have a writing goal every day and you don't meet it like 1 or 2 days or even a week, like, I think if you are beating yourself up over it, it's like counterproductive, because it's just going to make it harder for you to get back into the swing of things. Like, it's okay to sometimes be like, I had a bad day. It happens to everybody. I'll try again tomorrow,
Absolutely. You have to practice a little bit of kindness
Right.
with yourself. And I think we all have to acknowledge that even if the pandemic wasn't physically affecting us, if it wasn't interfering with our childcare or anything else, there's a psychic weight to living through these grand events.
Yeah.
Which I've really had enough of being like living through history at this point. Could we just go back to the boring bit? This is horrible.
I think I definitely experienced kind of pandemic fatigue, and I had a book that I knew I was going to be on deadline for, and so I was trying to start it, and I couldn't write it for months. And I actually ended up like working with a writing coach, because I was like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I think I'm broken as a writer. Like, okay, I've written, 8, 9 books, not all of them published, but it's funny how you can be very capable, know you can write books, and still be like, I'm broken.
Every time.
But yeah, I question myself every time. But what I found for me personally, she actually had me do some personality tests, and she was like, isn't this interesting? Your personality type thrives on stability. Tell me about your life. And I'm like, well, the pandemic hit, our house flooded, we lost half our belongings. My uncle passed away from COVID.
God.
All of these things were happening. And for some reason, I thought I could write a book at the same time, right? And as soon as she was like, the repair people who came in to take care of our flooding damage brought bed bugs with them. So that was happening. Our gas line broke, so we had no hot water for a month. Like, there was so much going on. And I was like, I have to be able to write my book. Why can't I write my book? It's not working.
Because the world's on fire. What the hell?
Give yourself grace, right? And be aware that when there is so much exhaustion or so much stress on you, sometimes your creative mind, it can't work. Even if you think you're giving itself space, if you are the kind of personality type that thrives on stability, and the whole world and your personal world is burning down, you're not going to be able to do it. And it is not a failure on your part. I learned how to compartmentalize stability. I learned to create small, stable moments in my life where I could then let my creative juices flow. And I don't know that, everyone can do that or whatever, but it's just sometimes you have to play Jedi mind tricks with yourself. But sometimes burnout and exhaustion and stress and pandemic fatigue are very, very real. And you have to take the time and the focus, the introspection. And if you're not the kind of person who journals, maybe you're the kind of person who talks out loud to your friends, like whatever your method is, figure out what it is that's putting you in this place. And then figure out, like, is it something you can change? Because maybe the answer is no, and you just need to give yourself time so you can get out of that space. But maybe it is something that you can affect in some way, like me compartmentalizing things, finding the way I actually got myself out of that was finding a non-stressful project that was like my cotton candy project. And it was my happy place to go. And so I was able to start writing again because it was finally an escape instead of an on deadline project that was just hard work I couldn't do. So, and I feel like we've all said this in different ways repeatedly, but like giving yourself grace, giving yourself space, and trying to do things a little differently as you reflect on what's happening. Like, I think these are really the key to figuring out your personal writer's block and what your personal cure is.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
SG, I don't think we heard from you there.
Oh, thank you. I love everything that Intisar said, and it's really beautiful. It said to allow yourself, to work on something that's easier. One of the things that I can thank the pandemic that came out of it is my love of writing prompts. And I didn't think that that's going to be something that I'm going to love, because a couple of years ago I tried them and I was horrified. Like, what's the point of this, right? But when the pandemic hit and my son was home, he's 16, he was 16 at the time, we thought it's a great idea to write, my husband would pick a prompt and then we would write it in 15 minutes and then read it out loud. So it became something that the whole family participated in it. And something clicked. I don't know what happened, but it was so much fun to do the writing prompts. Not only generated blog content, which I don't like blogging, but it also taught me to able to write pretty much about anything, right? And when I sat down to write, let it be 50 minutes, it usually was 45 minutes because I had to finish, but it just helped to get that understanding that I can write about anything in a timely manner. And that created this positive momentum that sometimes we authors, we writers, we need that momentum that we're accomplishing something. Let it be our notes, our world building, if we're fantasy and sci-fi authors, but just something that helps us to get into that fun element, because as it's important to have fun while we're writing, because otherwise the readers are not going to have fun reading it, right? So that was something the pandemic gave unexpectedly.
Yeah, that's amazing points all around. Just before we head on to questions there, and bring on the questions, folks who are here live, because we need to do something to make the people who are going to be watching the video on YouTube later very jealous. So take advantage right now. Now's the time. So just while we wait for those to come in and with the delay, how important do you think it is, giving everything we just said, giving the way the world is, pre, post, not even post, mid pandemic and war fatigue and everything else? How important is it as authors with regards to writing block, or even just beyond, to cut yourself some slack, basically?
Not important.
So
Don't do it. Never cut yourself slack.
No slacks.
Never give yourself
ever.
a minute's rest.
No.
You're just going to fall into bad habits.
You need to wear kilts, no slacks. That's the whole point, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. No, I am quite ready to admit I'm an idiot. I have always pushed myself far too hard to try and get my words down as quick as I can so I can move on to the next thing, because, again, paid by the word. That was always the plan. So I pushed myself and burnt out. And then I kept on pushing and kept on burning out. And I'm now at the stage where I'm actually having to deliberately limit myself to how many words I'm allowed to write a day, because that's the hard deadline. I can do that many words. I can't try and push for more. I can't try and get ahead of things. And that little bit of structure has made a world of difference for me. I know it's completely counterintuitive to everything that authors do, but it does seem to make a difference. Just it's not so much kindness as recognizing the horrible fault in my own character. And I think that's probably what kindness is, right?
It's creating boundaries and limits for yourself, and that is a kindness to yourself.
Yeah, I mean, they say write every day. I don't. I take weekends off. I mean, I have a toddler. What am I gonna do? Like try to write while she's like, yeah, like that. That would be pretty sad if I didn't spend time with my kid. But I think like sometimes about like what my mom always says to me, where she's like, work hard, work really, really hard, but not too hard. But work hard. So you kind of like have to find a balance.
One of the things that I've done that has helped me, because I know we've talked about word count and that sort of stuff before, I have switched to time blocks, and I have a goal of a certain number of time blocks a week. And once I've hit that, if I want to keep going, I sure can. But I've hit my minimum, like your JD, and but the time blocks allow me to not feel like if I spend time journaling about what is going to happen in my book, that's time block, that's time on my book. If I've even gotten to the point where since I've told you all that I hide in my bed and daydream, if I spend time and I'm actively thinking about my story in my bed, that's a time block, and I will count it. Because I have to value that as story processing time. But also, like, especially when you're editing, if you're doing words, it's so demotivating, because I will throw out whole chapters, right? And then you end up with like 3,000 less words than you started with, and you're just like, what did I accomplish? But if I'm like, well, I spent an hour, that's two, I do half an hour time blocks. So I was like, I spent 2 time blocks working on this. Like, that's great. That's progress. But it also helps me, like, if I'm not doing, if I'm in kind of this writer's block situation, and I'm counting time, a lot of times it helps me to be like, oh, well, writing the words isn't working. Like, what can I do that will work? Like, and I've sometimes, like, I'll just take my phone and like walk around the house or go for a walk in the park and just like talk the story out loud and making a voice memo, like whatever it is, like changing up your process to kind of break through the situation that you're dealing with. But for me, like, looking at it as the amount of, am I trying to get in 3 hours this week? Am I trying to get in 6 hours this week? And then just, I have, and my children are not as young as yours, Andrea, but they've been home over the pandemic. And so my time block goals over the pandemic have been pretty small, and they've still been pretty challenging to meet. But you do what you can for yourself, and then give yourself slack or a kilt or whatever it is you need to be all right with it. We're all human.
Jane?
Yeah, I think the takeaway from both what Andrea and Intisar said is the balance, and I think JD hit on that too, is whatever the balance looks like to you, try to find that. And yes, there are going to be days when you go a little bit above it or a little bit under it, but just know that you are doing your best, and everything adds up. Even as Intisar said, just thinking about your story, that will make it the next day writing that scene easier, or taking a day off, like Andrea said, and just have time with your family if you can, or with your friend, just so that you can recharge and get back to writing and refresh your inspiration and creativity.
Awesome. Words to live by. We have one question, courtesy of the inimitable QuaranCon2022 in chat. How many cats do you have, GD? I think we may have answered this, and I'm pretty sure the answer is 4.
4 cats, 1 dog, 2 guinea pigs at present. I'm not counting the spiders. Who knows how many are in here?
Well, we might as well have a round of animal time, speaking of balance and things. Why not? So we know, obviously, we've got demonstration here with Andrea.
Yeah, he keeps touching my face. This is what he does when I'm trying to write too. He'll come over and start patting my face.
Mhm.
I was wondering. I was like,
And I'm like, they make you a little bit difficult, dude.
This keyboard looks like an important thing. I should take possession of it.
Yeah.
I actually have a friend who sets up a distraction laptop for the cat to sit on top of while he's trying to work.
Nice. I like that. Obviously, no pressure if people don't have animals. That's also extremely cool. But I don't want any pressure there. But Intisar and SG, anything to?
Oh, my little dog is sleeping in the corner. Oh, he is no help to get me motivated or get me going. He's snoring there. His legs are up. He's shameless. Thank you very much.
we are sadly petless, but my children have grand plans to change that in the next month. So we'll
Oh,
see.
no.
Good luck to you.
Yeah, currently they're in the market for both a cat and a dog. I'm not sure if this is going to work or not, but we'll see.
I mean, I can loan you some cats if you want. I have cat spares. You know,
That's how
consider
you
yourself
do it, JD. You loan the cats out, huh?
keeps the
Is
roof
it a
over our
writing
heads.
cat? Because if so, I'm coming to get it.
They will all sit on your lap while you write, so you're all set.
Perfect.
It's a pretty good deal right there.
Other than puffins, like that fellow over there, doesn't want to consume my pen. We've got initially we had 2 golden labs, and then because we weren't as on the ball with regards to operations as we should have been, and it was a male and a female, we ended up with a whole home whelped litter of puppies, one of which we had to keep because it was such a great experience and for the children as well. So so we have 3 plus a bunny. Yes.
Don't do that. Sorry.
A very large pygmy bunny.
Cat's biting my feet.
Oh, we have
They're just delightful,
actual,
aren't they?
we have an actual topical question there. Not that wasn't a good question. Do any of you do any writing exercises to get back into the flow, like stream of consciousness things or any routines that are useful?
You know, the only thing sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, you go ahead. You go ahead first.
This is the only thing I do, which is it's not editing, but whenever I start writing, I will go back to what I wrote previously, at least 3 or 4 pages, and I'll read through it. And I'm not there to edit it. I'm just there. I'll tweak a little bit as I'm going. But by the time I finish reading that last section, my brain has gotten back into the flow of that story usually. And so I'll just keep going from there. So I call it cycling because I'll cycle back anytime I get stuck. But it's not an intensive line edit like SG had mentioned earlier, some people doing. It's really, it's just I'm making minor tweaks as I go to kind of get my brain going. But I know this chapter is going to change significantly when I get to revisions. So it's really just to get me into the flow of the story. That's my only routine.
Cool. I do have to put on my moderator hat for a second there to say that we do want to be relatively quick on this to make sure we have time for a quick outro and plug pass for the end there. So whoever wants to pop in next.
I think I already mentioned I turned off the internet. Another thing I do is I open up another document and do a quick hey, this is what I'm going to write about today, and this is what I'm excited about in this scene, that kind of thing, just to get myself hyped up a little.
Excellent.
The cheerleading page.
Yeah.
I wish I could say I had time to do exercises, but I'm just sitting down and doing the work and then running away from it as quickly as possible. So nothing.
Yeah, outside of music, I just, as JD says, sit down and start writing.
I love the people who will they'll light a candle and they have they really do have this whole ambiance they create for writing. And I'm just that's awesome. I sit down in my messy room.
I have one hand out to keep one of the kids screaming away from me while I'm trying to type with the other hand. That's...
I have heard some people mention like it helps them to have like a special scent that they like smell before they sit down and write, and it kind of gets them in that headspace.
Yeah.
I mean, Stephen King had that. He had cocaine. That was his special scent. Wish I could afford cocaine.
I mean, I think the answer here is like, you do you, right? Like,
exactly.
Whatever works for you, that's what works.
And whatever you can afford by the sounds of it, but yeah.
Yeah.
Right, so quick, we'll go back to the initial order maybe, just so there's no no pressure there. Quick outro, where we can find your stuff, anything you want to plug. Now is the designated time. SG.
I have a website, sgblaise.com, where you can find characters, links to the books on Amazon and Apple and Kobo and Google Play. We have maps, constantly adding new content there. You can also find my social media links to Instagram, sgblaise official, Twitter, sgblaise author. I have a Facebook, Facebook link there too for the Less Lomanian page. And we constantly add more content there, so I highly recommend to check it out to see more character illustrations. And we're also running a costume contest that will be wrapping up end of April. This is not to be confused with cosplay contest. It has a little bit more flexibility. You don't have to make your own costume, but you do have to create something that fits the characters. I hope people check it out and join the contest. There are great prizes to win.
It's amazing. I'm extremely jealous. GD?
Well, damn, I don't have any fancy prizes. Okay. You can go to gdpenman.com to find all of my books and stuff. And I suppose I should plug my Savage Dominion books because the third one's coming out in June. So if you want a big horny idiot hitting things with a sword, done.
Amazing. Intisar?
I'm at booksbyintisar.com and on socials with the handle Books by Intisar. And my next release is coming up in the Dauntless Path books. The first one is Thorn, and it's a fairy tale retelling. So
very cool.
Looking forward to that one.
So I have a website, andreagstewart.com, which is very unupdated. And then I'm on social, on Twitter, which I am much more updated on at Andrea G. Stewart. Same for Instagram. My second book, The Bone Shard Emperor, is coming out in paperback on the 19th in the US and then the 21st in the UK. So I'm excited about that.
Intisar, a little voice is whispering in my ear set that you have a Kickstarter going as well.
I do. I have thank you. I have a Kickstarter that is launching on Thursday for my next release, and it's going to have a signed special edition and a signed discounted hardcover and a bunch of swag and art prints and fun stuff. So please check it out.
Swag?
So all the links there as well are available on the QuaranCon website with the panelist bios. So you can catch them there. That includes myself with very much like Andrea website, which is very, very poorly updated at lawlessauthor.com. But there are some free short stories on there, which are pretty cool as part of my, all set in the same universe as General Buzz series, and which was nominated for Hugo Best Novel last year for this, not nominated, sorry, longlisted nominated for the Best Novel Hugo last year. So that's that. But definitely Space Lawyer SF right there. Shameless plug. It's definitely best because I'll follow back and we can chat. It's a grand time. So yes, next panel is non-existent. That's next to my thing there. There is no outside. This is the last panel. We have completed QuaranCon. We win. Thank you for coming, everybody. Thanks for participating. Thanks all of you for being here, most importantly, around the table, the virtual table. And out there. Thanks for QuaranCon for organizing an amazing convention yet again, and encouraging all to stay the F home. Rightfully so as well. I am tasked to mention the book sale, which is going on. Again, as I mentioned earlier, free books and 99-cent ones. You may or may not find the first book in my series there towards the top, because I chose a book that starts with A, because hey, that's clever. And key notions when you're choosing your title. And yeah, so again, thanks so much for being here. It's been an amazing convention. Hopefully everybody is charged up with ideas and community motivation. And now with all the ways to solve any potential writing block issues, so there's no excuse, go write. And thank you for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
so much.
In 30 minutes, you'll see me and Pam making fools of ourselves, thanking everyone and saying goodbye. So come watch
Great.
that.
Can't wait.
And I'm about to end the stream. Everybody wave and smile. Bye.